Don't bother wrapping her present. My brother's words hissed through his teeth, bitter as venom. I can't wait until Emily finally leaves this house for good. Dad's laugh followed, hard, sharp, splintering like broken glass. Not until she pays off the 20 grand mortgage. She owes us that much. The sound carved into me. I froze in the doorway, ribbon still in my hand, half curled for the gift I had been preparing for Dad's birthday. They didn't see me. I was a shadow, invisible, watching the two of them grin as though sharing a private joke. Hello, my name is Emily Carter, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the quiet one. The patcher, the helper, the one who filled the gaps so the house wouldn't collapse. But how do you keep loving people who take a knife to your worth, who mark borders around your existence, until you're nothing more than an outsider inside your own bloodline? That night, I lay in bed with the hum of the refrigerator louder than my pulse. Their words clung to me like chains. $20,000. To them, it wasn't a figure, it was a leash. A way to keep me tied to their expectations long after I believed I had bought my freedom. The next morning, I brewed coffee in the chip-striped mug Dad always left on the counter for me. The bitterness filled my mouth before the cup even reached my lips. The house smelled of stale grease, of dust, of decay. The walls seemed to sag, heavy with secrets they had overheard. Every creak seemed to whisper, "You are not welcome here." But inside me, something else stirred, something hotter, brighter. I pressed my palm flat against the kitchen table and whispered, if they think I'm just a mortgage, then they've never truly met me. 2 days later, the backyard twinkled with strung-up lights, each bulb glittering like a promise no one intended to keep. Smoke from the grill hung thick in the air. Forced laughter rattled around the party like tin bells. I slid into my dress, every stitch stitched with a vow I hadn't spoken aloud. Glasses clinked, conversations swelled. My brother's smirk floated across the crowd, sharp as a thrown knife. I stepped forward, glass in hand, and suddenly the noise around me began to dim. The moment stretched, taut as a bowstring waiting to snap. My lips bent into a curve, but not into the docile smile they expected. I lifted my glass, letting it strike gently against the microphone. The hollow chime rang through the night and stilled the chatter. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. They were waiting for the speech I was supposed to give, the sweet, rehearsed words of a dutiful daughter honoring her father. My brother leaned back in his chair, satisfied, convinced he knew the part one would play. The obedient, quiet, harmless Emily. But when I spoke, my voice didn't shake. Thank you all for being here tonight. Celebrating Dad's birthday means a great deal to me. I paused, letting the silence breathe, my gaze brushing across the glowing lanterns swaying above us in the night breeze. But celebrations deserve honesty too. A ripple of unease moved through the tables. Dad gave a short, uneasy laugh, lifting his beer as though he could wave away the moment. But I pressed on. 2 nights ago, I overheard a conversation. My brother said he couldn't wait for me to be gone. And Dad, you laughed. You said I wouldn't be leaving until I paid a $20,000 mortgage. The hush that fell was thick, suffocating. Forks clinked as they dropped onto plates. Someone cleared their throat too loudly. My brother's face hardened, then twisted into a brittle smile. You must have misunderstood, he said quickly, trying to smother the truth under a laugh. But I fixed my gaze on him, the light of the lantern catching the rim of my glass and throwing it across his pale forehead. I didn't misunderstand, I said slowly, making every syllable deliberate. Dad's jaw tightened. Emily, this isn't the place. This is exactly the place. My voice cut across his, trembling at the edges, but sharper than I had ever let it be. Because all my life, I've been the dutiful daughter, the silent one, the convenient one. And yet, when the door is shut, I'm nothing more to you than a number. A debt you can laugh about over drinks. The crowd shifted, unease buzzing like static. Whispers slipped from table to table, curling into the night air. Neighbors, relatives, colleagues, they had all come expecting warmth, tradition, celebration. Instead, they were watching a house of lies crack apart beneath the lantern glow. I lifted my glass slowly, feeling the weight of the moment press against my skin. Tonight, I would not fade into the background. Tonight I would speak. My brother's grip tightened on his fork until it screeched against the plate. Dad's smile collapsed into something hard and empty. Their little celebration had just become my stage. This was only the beginning. The silence stretched, thick as smoke. Even the night seemed to pause, the backyard holding its breath. Somewhere, a child shifted in their chair. A dog barked once, then went quiet again. My hand trembled faintly, but my gaze stayed fixed on my father and brother. My brother cracked first, forcing out a brittle laugh. "She's being dramatic," he muttered, pushing back from the table. "You know Emily, always craving attention." A few guests chuckled nervously, unsure which side to stand on. I didn't move. I set my glass down and spoke again, my voice quieter but sharper, each word sliding through the air like a blade. "Attention? No. What I'm asking for is respect. What I deserve is honesty." Dad's jaw tightened, his eyes giving me that same look I'd seen 100 times, anger mixed with disappointment, as if my very presence was a problem. "Emily, sit down," he ordered. "We don't talk about family business in front of outsiders." "Company," I said, straightening. "That's exactly the point. You didn't mind turning me into a joke when you thought I wasn't listening. You didn't hesitate to reduce me to a number, $20,000, as if that's all I'm worth." A hush swept over the crowd. An aunt bent to whisper into her husband's ear. A neighbor leaned closer, eyes round. The warm glow from the birthday lanterns suddenly felt harsh and cold, like a spotlight exposing everything. My brother's face flushed dark. He leaned forward, voice low and venomous. "If you think you can humiliate us like this, you're making a mistake." I tilted my head, almost smiling. "Funny. That's exactly what I thought when I overheard you plotting." Dad slammed his beer down, foam spilling onto the table. "Enough," he barked. "This is my birthday, not your performance." I met his glare, steady and calm. "Then maybe you should have treated it like family, not a transaction." A collective gasp rippled through the backyard. The balance shifted, subtle but undeniable. Their eyes were no longer on me as the problem. For the first time, they were looking at them. Doubt flickered across faces. Dad's roar still echoed, but no one lifted a glass, no one tried to laugh it off. The party sat frozen, teetering. Every face turned toward us, waiting. I didn't sit down. I didn't look away. I let the silence hang heavy and use itself. "You say this is your birthday," I said quietly, my voice steady but trembling at the edges. "But for years, every gathering has been about my mistakes, my debts, my flaws. And still I came. I showed up, hoping someday I'd be more than the family punchline." My brother's fork clattered against his plate, the sound like a warning bell. "She's twisting everything," he snarled. "Dad gave you everything and you still whine." I turned fully to face him. "Everything? That's what you call it? I call it leverage. I call it being reminded at every turn that I'm ungrateful, that I'll never measure up." Gasps rippled again. Somewhere an uncle muttered under his breath, "She's right." Dad's face reddened, the creases at his mouth deepening. His hand trembled as he pointed at me. "You have no idea what we sacrificed." "I do." I cut in, my voice sharp now, splitting his words in half. "I counted every extra shift I worked to keep the bills paid. I remember every night I went without so you could replace his car, fund his projects, pay his tuition. I never complained. Not once. But tell me, what did I get in return?" The night held still, waiting for the answer he wouldn't give. Laughter rippled behind me, low and knowing, like they had already decided what I was worth. A number attached to my name, not a person anymore, but a debt. My chest rose and fell as the air grew heavier, pressing against my ribs. Lanterns swayed in the breeze, their flickering light stretching shadows across their faces until they looked less like family and more like something else. Sharper, hungrier, monstrous. For the first time, I wasn't small. For the first time, I felt taller than all of them, stronger than the walls they'd built to cage me in. I stepped closer to the table, lowering my voice until it slid through the stillness like a blade hidden inside a whisper. "Tonight," I said, "I'm not carrying this weight anymore." The silence that followed was no longer confusion. It was fear, raw and unspoken but heavy enough to taste. My brother's knuckles whitened against the edge of the table. My father's breathing turned shallow, uneven, like he'd just realized the script wasn't his to direct anymore. I squared my shoulders, letting my eyes sweep across the guests. You all came here for a party, I continued softly. But maybe it's time you heard the truth. For 4 years, I've been painted as the burden, the one who owes, the shadow to my brother's spotlight. But here's the thing. I paused. The air coiled tighter. Faces leaned closer, like they couldn't look away even if they wanted to. The mortgage? I said finally. It isn't mine. Whispers broke out like small waves smashing against stone. My brother's face lost its color. She's lying, he snapped. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I tilted my head slightly, my smile thin and cutting. Am I? Because last month, the bank sent me paperwork by mistake. Paperwork with your name on it. The $20,000 mortgage you and Dad joked about belongs to you. Not me. Gasps fractured the night. Somewhere near the back. A glass shattered, but nobody turned toward it. Every gaze stayed locked on us. My father's palm slammed down on the table with a crack that echoed across the yard. That's enough, he barked. But for the first time in my life, his voice cracked. I leaned forward, voice steady and low. No, Dad. What's enough is watching you protect him while bleeding me dry. Enough is being told I owe, when all this time I've been the one keeping this house afloat. My brother's jaw flexed, his fury flickering into something else. Panic. And the crowd saw it too. The mask was slipping, crumbling under the weight of truth. I stepped back, cool night air touching my skin like a blessing, my heart pounding but calm. So, if anyone's waiting for me to leave, I said, maybe ask him first if he plans to pay up. Murmurs rose and fell like jagged wind, slicing into their pride. In that moment, I knew I had only just begun. The backyard felt less like a party and more like a courtroom, every guest a juror. Neighbors leaned closer. Relatives shifted uncomfortably. Coworkers whispered into their palms. My father and brother, untouchable no more, stood exposed. My brother shot up from his chair, his napkin slipping to the ground like a white flag he couldn't admit to dropping. You don't know what you're talking about, he shouted, his voice rising higher than he intended. Dad only signed for me so I could qualify. I raised a hand and cut him off, letting silence do what words couldn't. So, I said quietly, you admit it's yours. Gasps rippled again. He froze, realizing his slip, his eyes darting around as if searching for a way out that didn't exist. My father pushed back his chair and stood beside him, shoulders squared like he could still bluff his way through this. Emily, he said, his tone sharp but desperate, you're twisting this. Families help each other. That mortgage, it's all of ours. You should be proud to help. I stared at him, the lantern light dancing across his weathered face. Proud. My voice barely rose above a whisper, but it cut through everything. You mocked me for something that wasn't even mine. You let me carry shame that belonged to him. Tell me, Dad, was that your idea of help? The question drifted above the table like smoke no wind could clear. Guests avoided his eyes. Some shook their heads. My brother's fist slammed against the wood, but this time even that sound felt hollow. Their empire of control was crumbling, and everyone could see it. The plates rattled as my brother slammed the table. You're ruining everything, he spat. I leaned forward slightly, my tone even, almost glacial. No, I said. I'm revealing everything. There's a difference. The air thickened, sharp enough to sting the lungs. Then, from somewhere in the cluster of relatives, an aunt spoke loud enough for all to hear. She's right. Her words sliced the night apart. A few nodded, and just like that, I felt the tide shift. For the first time in years, I wasn't the lone figure bracing against the storm. My eyes moved from my father to my brother. This gathering was supposed to honor you, I said steadily. But it's only shown everyone who you really are. My brother's face flared crimson, the kind of red that comes from being exposed, not from being wronged. He jabbed a finger at me, his voice cracking. You think you're smart? You think they care? Tomorrow this'll be forgotten. You'll still be nothing in this family. But the murmur building through the crowd told a different story. Neighbors leaned back with folded arms, eyes narrowing, not at me but at him. My uncle shook his head grimly. A cousin whispered. I knew something wasn't right. My heartbeat thundered, but it wasn't fear anymore, it was release. I drew in a steady breath and let my voice cut cleanly through the night. You call me a nobody, but who paid your bills last winter when you couldn't? Who took double shifts when Dad's hours got cut? And when you needed tuition money, who stayed up working to cover what the bank denied you? The words landed heavier than I expected. A few guests nodded. Some dropped their gaze to their laps. My brother opened his mouth, then shut it again. No excuse fast enough to cover the truth. Emily enough, my father cut in, his voice sharp with desperation. You're humiliating us. I turned toward him, meeting his eyes without flinching. No, Dad. You humiliated yourselves the day you laughed at me. The day you made me the villain in stories, while I was the one keeping things together. Now the crowd wasn't whispering. They were watching outright. Their judgment a verdict none of them could escape. She's just bitter, my brother tried again, his voice climbing into a shrill defense. She twists everything to make herself the victim. I tilted my head, studying him like a stranger. Victim? Not anymore, I said softly. This isn't bitterness. This is clarity. The hush that followed was deeper than silence. Lantern light trembled, throwing jagged shadows over faces that had lost their power. I let the quiet stretch until it pressed into their skin. My brother stood rigid, trembling. My father's jaw was locked, but neither spoke. They didn't need to. The crowd had already seen enough. Their house of intimidation had collapsed, brick by brick, under paper lanterns and the weight of truth. I stepped forward, my hand steady. I was no longer the fragile daughter begging for scraps of affection. My voice dropped, lower but sharper than before. For years, I carried your debts, your ridicule, your laughter at my expense. I thought silence meant loyalty, but loyalty without respect is just slavery. A ripple of agreement spread, heavy and undeniable. My aunt dabbed at her eyes. Someone whispered, she's right. I lifted my glass once more, my final act. Let's make something clear. That $20,000 debt? It isn't mine. It never was. I won't wear chains forged from lies anymore. The glass touched the table with deliberate calm, the ring of crystal cutting through the night like a bell tolling the end of a chapter. I straightened, locking eyes with each person, saving my father's for last. You said I couldn't leave until I cleared the mortgage. Well, consider it cleared, because I'm done owing you anything. Gasps broke across the crowd, but I felt lighter, freer. My brother's lips moved uselessly, no words finding him. My father slumped back into his chair, drained, as the judgment of silence weighed heavier than my words ever could. I turned toward the exit. Lantern light brushed across my face as I stepped forward, no longer in retreat, but in triumph. Behind me, the party collapsed into whispers and uneasy shifting, but I never looked back. My heels pressed against the grass, steady, measured, final. The night air wrapped itself around me, cool, alive, and I realized something so simple I almost laughed at it. I wasn't leaving in pieces. I was leaving whole. And that was the only gift worth carrying with me.